All right, so we're gonna go ahead and check the valve shims on an engine that's already in the vehicle, because that's gonna be what most of you do. So you can see here, we've already got the front end off. You don't have to do this. We're doing something else here, that's why this is off. If you wanna take the chain off, you can do that, but you have to be careful that the cams don't flop into a bad spot. So instead of doing that, I'm gonna show you how to check the shims, and then I'm gonna show you how to change the shims while it's still sitting in the engine with your front cover on. So let's pretend that the front cover's on. So the first thing we need to do is measure out our shims. So just crudely written down the tighten procedure for the cam caps, because to take the shims out, we're going to have to release the cam caps. If you do it easily and you do it safely and use this procedure, you'll be fine. So this is the tighten procedure and this is the loosen procedure. So first thing we're gonna do is go down and write what our shim clearance is before we check the actual shim. All right, so we know we've got our paper set up here where we can mark down what our shim clearance is. So I is for intake side, E is for exhaust side, and then we've got our front here. You want to make sure that you have them all correct, because if you are to get them reversed or backwards, you will get incorrect shim size and then there'll be a problem. Okay, so for K6A, we know we want to have between 0.18 and 0.23 clearance on our shims. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. Now you can test two at a time. So if you'll notice here, we have these up for the middle on the exhaust side and these up for the rear on the intake side. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna start a little tight and go up until we find the one we want. So we'll pull out our feeler gauges here. Okay, let's go to right below 18. Let's go to 15. Okay, we'll start with 15. Okay, so 15 goes in easily for that one. And for that one. Okay, so now let's go up to 18. Okay, and make sure you only have one here. If you get them stuck together, you may get a false reading. Okay, so 18 also fits. It's getting a little more snug, which is good. Same thing here. Okay, so we're gonna go on up to 20. If this one is where it's at, that would be fantastic. 9 times out of 10, it's not gonna be the case, but one can hope. Okay, so that went in a little bit more tight. Okay, so we're getting pretty close. You're also 20. Okay, let's go up again. Let's go to 23. All right, so we're gonna try 2.3. Okay, 0.23 millimeter. Okay, it barely goes in. It's getting a little more snug. Okay, so we're getting pretty close. Okay, let's go down to a 0.25 here. Okay, it still slipped in, so we're still at 2.5. Make sure we got one. Yeah. Okay, 2.5 will not go on this one. The one that went in was 0.23, but we always want to end on a positive number, okay? So we're going to call that 0.24. Okay, you see here down here, I made some incorrect ones there previously, so I'm going to go ahead and mark it 2.4. I accidentally had them doubled up there. Okay, so that one's 2.4. Let's check these other ones here. Okay, 2.5 goes in there very easily, so we're going to go to the next one. So the next one is 2.8. Okay, 2.8 also goes. Okay, so we know we've got too much gap there. We already did that one. Okay, 2.8 doesn't fit here, so we're going to call this 2.6. Okay, those aren't too far off, but more than I would like. Okay, so 2.8 still goes in for these two, so we've got to go up from there. So we're going to go up to 3.0. Okay. 3.0 still goes. 3.0 still goes. Okay, so we're going to the next one. And you just have to keep continuing to go up until you figure out what the tolerance is. Okay, so let's make sure. Okay, so we're going to 3.3. So if this one doesn't go, we'll say the tolerance is 3.2. Okay. Okay, so that one won't go, so we'll call it 3.2. Okay, stop. All right, so now I have measured all off my clearances, okay? And we see none of them are really within spec here. They're a little bit, the gap is a little bit too big on most of them. We do have one that's 0.16. The reason the spec goes down like this is because maybe previously, if the head had been overhauled, the valve seal had to be cleaned excessively to make it seat. And what that does, removing material, makes the clearance a little smaller. We're going to take it off now. We're going to take all the bolts out and pull the cam up, both of the cams up, and take the shims out, so we can see what number the shims are. And from there, we'll be able to determine where we need to be with what shims. All right, so now you can see I've unbolted all of these, and I used the unbolting order that I had written down earlier, the reverse order, okay? And I've pulled the two back ones out so I can get more leverage. And you know, never go front to back with these, always take them off side to side, okay? And you can use this one to kind of work this one up. Nope, I'm gonna lose a bolt there. But you can use this one to work this one up. Let me grab that. Make sure they all go back in their spots. I'll put that back here. Okay, so we've got them all up here now, okay? So now, as you can see, just gently push up on the camshafts. If you push up on the camshafts, it'll give you just enough room to get your shims out without putting a bind on the cam, okay? So just for example, we're gonna start on this back one here. So what I've got here is I've got a magnet and I've got a small flathead here, right? Okay, so what we're gonna do is, let's try this one here. You see how it has an indentation there? We're just gonna push, hold it in place, lightly pry in between on that indentation. And there it is, it pops right in. Okay, I'm gonna use the magnet. Okay, and so here's our first shim. Okay, and as we flip it over, we can see that it's a 264. Okay, a little hard to see there. Okay, so if we go back over to our notes, that is this one right here. We write it's actually 2.64 millimeters is what it is. But they just number them 264. We'll write that down next to the 0.32, and then we'll run the calculation to find out what we need to get between 0.18 and 0.23. Preferably 0.20 is where you want to be, okay? So I'm going to take a couple more of these, and then we'll come back and see how to do that. All right, so here you can see we have our shims out. You can see all the numbers. One thing to note is when you take your shims out, make sure the number is, you've got to lubricate this part and make sure the number is always down on the bucket. If you don't put it down, then when the cam rolls over, it's going to erase the number. So you always put the number down. Remember we've got them all marked here. Remember this one was 0.16, okay? So it was 0.02 out of spec. Well, ironically enough, this is a 264, so that's 2.64. That's pretty big. That's the biggest of all of these. For some reason, someone's put that in there. Maybe originally from the factory, it was within spec. So that'll be an easy one to fix. One thing you can do is you'll have to order shims to adjust these to where you need them to be. But you can take, for example, if you need 256 and you have 254 and you're not, this is out of spec, you can put the 256 in that spot and vice versa. But you probably will end up having to order shims. Or if you're lucky enough, like us, we have a lot of engines that we've overhauled over the years. We have a bucket full of shims. We can go through and calculate the number or check the number. If you don't have a number on them, you need to use the gauge to determine what the thickness of it is. If it's 254, 252, 218. 218 is the bottom. You will use your gauge to find the thickness of those if they don't have a number. Sometimes, every once in a while, you'll have one that doesn't have a number, and you just have to use your gauge to, I forget what that gauge is called, the...
micrometer.
Yes, the micrometer, thank you. The micrometer to check the size of this. Okay, so what we want to do now is our calculation. Side here. Take the gloves off here. You can see, just easily set the cams back down in their spot while they're waiting. It's not going to hurt anything. Just be gentle. Everything you do, just be gentle. The magnet, like I said, we use the magnet. The magnet really helps. We just pop them out of place and then use the magnet to draw them in. Okay, so let me get my glove off here. All right, so we're just gonna do one of these just so you can see. And let's go ahead and do the 0.16 since it's the easiest. Okay, so it's a 264. So what that is, sorry, it's a little sweaty. That's actually a 2.64 millimeter shim, okay? So what we wanna know is we wanna get from between 0.18 and 0.23. So we wanna actually be at 0.20. That's what kind of clearance we want. And we're at 0.16 right now. Okay, so what that means is we need to subtract, since this is lower than what we want, we need to subtract 0.04 millimeter from this, okay? From this one, okay? Because that's what we're missing. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna subtract 0.04 millimeter. And what's that give us? 2.60. So this is the ideal shim we're looking for. Remember, all your numbers have to be positive. If you get to one of these and it's for example, 0.17 or 0.15, you always go down. So that would make this 0.16, or if you had 0.15, that would be 0.14. You always give yourself a little bit more space on that side, okay? So, okay, so we want a 0.260. So what we need to do is, if we don't have any of these, so here's a 0.260, right? We could technically put that shim here, okay? Because this is gonna need something else. Okay, so let's do this one just for example. So this is a 2.60 millimeter, okay? And we wanna be in 0.20, so we need to actually add to this one, okay? We need to add 0.4, okay? All right, so what we're gonna do is 0.26 millimeter plus 0.04 equals what? 264, okay? So that's actually great because we can use this shim here and this shim here, and it'll put them both at 0.20, okay? So that's the way you do that. Remember, when you do put these shims back in, get one here for example. When you do put these shims back in, remember, so like I mentioned earlier, this shim doesn't have a number on it, okay? If it doesn't have a number, then it doesn't really matter which side you put it on, but better to lube this side with the number. Let me just grab one that has a number here. I have more than one that doesn't have a number on it. There we go. Okay, here we got a 242. See that there? 242. You lubricate this side, drop it in, and then lubricate this side for the lobe to run on, okay? And then you can just pour a little oil over the top of the valves or top of the camshafts before you put the cover back on. Okay, so that should help you. How frequent you should check this? The service manual says, I believe it's 44,000 kilometers. That's not very many miles, but that's how often it says to check this. Realistically, you could let it go a little further than that. But of course, we're going by the service manual. So if it says 44,000 kilometers, then 44,000 kilometers it is. We're doing this video, it's a little bit further out than what we normally do, but we're doing this video because we had a request for it. So if this is something you want to do at home, you can definitely do it. You're going to need the feeler gauge, you're going to need an 8mm socket, and you're going to need 8mm to take the valve cover off, and just a couple of various other basic tools that you should have. But anyway, I hope this helps, and if you have any questions, please let me know.